Thank you very, very much for joining us again for another edition of the ASLA Emerging Professionals Committee Ask Me Anything events. We are so excited that you're here with us again. We have a great guest today and expect a lively, interesting conversation. My name is Daniel Martin, and I'm with Permalot Corporation and a member of the Emerging Professionals Committee that puts this event on. And with me today, pretty much as always, are my fellow committee members, Chelsea Keith and Amy Severson. So welcome to you guys. And without any further ado, we're going to get right underway. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to introduce today's guest. Amy.
Hello, everybody. So with us today is David Rubin, Principal of Land Collective. David A. Rubin is the founding principal of Land Collective, a landscape architecture and urban design studio committed to practicing with an emphasis on socially purposeful design strategies. Educated at Connecticut College and Harvard University, he has taught and lectured at a number of institutions, including Harvard University's Graduate School of Design, the University of Pennsylvania's School of Design, and Southern California Institute of Architecture. David is the 2011 to 2012 recipient of the Rome Prize in Landscape Architecture from the American Academy in Rome. His projects have received awards and honors from the American Institute of Architects and the American Society of Landscape Architects, among others. David founded Land Collective after 21 years in practice to devote himself to crafting landscapes which affect positive social change through empathy-driven design. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
I should also note that, full disclosure, I work for David, so there's no preferential treatment here, but...
And we are great collaborators together. It's a lot of fun. I just happen to be away from the office today, but I'm thrilled to be joining Amy and the team on this event.
Great. We are very happy to have you, and clearly you're very good at choosing employees, if nothing else. But you've been a great help to our committee and to the Ask Me Anything events. So without any further ado, we're gonna throw you out there and get some answers and see what our viewers would like to know from you. So
okay.
I'm excited about this. So I will get started with the first question, and then we will go from there. So we kind of have 5 or 6 questions that we ask everybody right off the bat, and kind of gives us a baseline and something to go back on. So we're going to start there with the first question. If there was one thing you wish you could go tell your younger landscape architect self, what would it be?
So I have actually had an extraordinary opportunity to learn, and one of the things that I wish I had known a little earlier was how to relax a little bit about things. I get very intense and very, in some respects, kind of aggressive about making things happen. I think that's a good trait. I do so gently. I'm not boisterous, I think, and I don't think I have a huge ego, although I do have one. But I wish that I could tell myself to relax a little bit more and actually take advantage of more opportunities rather than being myopic about pushing myself and my discipline forward. I have to remember to smell the roses. And that's something that happened as a result. I learned that most effectively when I was awarded the American Academy in Rome's Rome Prize Fellowship. It's an environment where you get to meet up. Well, you've been very myopic in your industry, right? You rise to the top, you win the prize, and their goal is actually to allow you to broaden your horizon view again. So you've gone from this youthful, broad horizon, you've become incredibly myopic within your field, and you've done a great deal of excellence, and then all of a sudden they put you in with poets and architects and historians and conservators and ancient scholars and the like, and all of a sudden all these doors start opening. And as a result of that, you are walking in and out of these doors with liberality, and you are thoughtful about it once again. So all of a sudden, your horizon view begins to expand, and it's your job afterwards to then remember to go out and keep those doors open. So my job as my current self is actually to try to maintain a broad horizon view, which I wish I could have told myself a long time ago.
All right, that's phenomenal advice. And very interesting that the scholarship, the fellowship, allowed you to kind of revisit that and look at things in a broader perspective again.
Yeah.
Tell us a little more about that fellowship or scholarship. How was it awarded? How are you selected? What's the process of that? I'm just curious.
So it's an applied for award. You have to submit a portfolio. You have to propose a project. You have to have work that is your own work. They're specifically interested in you as a designer and what your approach and ideas are. So you have to have a singular voice, which at the time of my submission I had been principal for a while, and so submitted and eventually won. It took a couple of attempts, but I'm thrilled to have participated. It is an extraordinary, I think it's one of the highest awards within our discipline, which I think is quite extraordinary that they thought that I was worthy. And it gave me a level of freedom to be thoughtful, which is a rarity these days. So yeah, it was perhaps the most life-changing event that I can think of in my experiences. And Land Collective wouldn't exist without it, since that was a direct product of my experiences in Rome.
Oh, very interesting. Awesome. Let's throw it over to Chelsea. She's got a question for you.
Sure.
So, who or what has had the biggest impact on your career?
Well, actually, I think it goes back to boarding school days. Actually, I was educated in a Quaker environment from kindergarten through age 16, and then I ended up at an all-boys Anglican boarding school up in Canada, about 100 miles northeast of Toronto. And it was there, actually, that I met an art teacher for the first time in my life that recognized I had a capacity to communicate visually and to learn visually. And that man actually really gave me the tools to work with visual information, to describe my world, to communicate in a context of visual information in such a way that I could excel. So that art teacher did extraordinary things for me. He passed away recently, probably in the last 5 years, and he was probably the most influential guy. And then I met an art professor in college, Tim McDowell, who still teaches at Connecticut College, and he pushed it even further. So he was instrumental.
It's really amazing the power that teachers have to influence the way that we think and see the world, and draw our attention to things that we never would have thought of before.
Yeah, actually, this art teacher in boarding school, one of the assignments we had to do was to go out and draw a tree, and it sounds banal, really kind of silly to go out and draw a tree, but what he was teaching us was the idea that a tree has form, three-dimensional form, that light comes down and expresses itself and reflects off of the leaves and branches, and that it is equally important to draw what you see as volume, but not to draw something as well. So you might end up drawing the shadow, but not the light. And in the end, you end up having a form that looks more realistic than you could ever have by simply studying every leaf and trying to render it accordingly. And it was actually one of those seminal moments where I suddenly realized that I would never see the world in the same way, because all of a sudden things became three-dimensional. Light impacted shadow, impacted volume, creating shadow. Shadow ended up being rendered. That rendered capacity ends up being the thing that you record, and all of a sudden you have a way of mapping the world. That is an incredible gift to give to somebody, and he gave that to me.
Absolutely. All right, you kind of segued into a great question. We're going to toss over to Amy. She's going to ask this one.
Sure.
Okay, so continuing on this idea of visual information and what it is that really gives us the basis of our study and communication in the field, the Emerging Professionals Committee wants to know, is it hand drawing or computer graphics?
It's not one or the other, but it's actually both. And what I find fascinating and what I love about our current studio, Land Collective, is that we are not prejudiced towards one or the other, but we actually try to, as we do with all things, employ multiple means of communication. So We have people drawing in hand, sketching in hand, doing wonderfully coarse, fantastic drawings, and at the same time, we have some of the best visualizers imaginable in our studio. Guys who are modifying code, really working the computer to have it render the most compelling live images. And I think the best work that we do is informed from both directions, where we're literally taking trace and hand drawings and watercolors or markers and figuring out ideas very coarsely in a very beautiful way, and then figuring out how to visualize them through computers. One of the things that I'm most proud of about our studio is that we get recognition as much for our social purpose as we do for our technical skill sets. The LAM magazine has been asking us questions regularly in both arenas, and to me that's expressive of the way in which we're pushing landscape architecture forward. Never singularly, never from point A to point B, but mapping it as best we can from all directions, for trying to not forget about any possible resource. So I'm sort of transferring your question beyond drawing or computer graphics, but it really goes to a philosophy of studio, which is, again, the full spectrum view gives you the greatest opportunity. If you shut down any door, you limit yourself in the capacity to communicate. And our studio in particular, an empathy-driven design studio, is about communication beyond ourselves. We problem solve for others. We put ourselves in the context of other people. It's not about us, it's about them. So when you're generating hand drawings or computers, you're really getting that emotive quality out there and then putting it physicalizing it in some other thing. Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. You have a follow-up, Amy?
Sure, absolutely. So kind of building on this idea of skills and traits that are used to bring our designs to the world, are there, for people who are learning landscape architecture or thinking about getting into it, are there skills and traits that every landscape architect should have?
Yes, absolutely. It's not only about visual communication, and it's fine to figure out how to do it in rendering through the computer. That is a necessity of our contemporary world. I would advocate as much for learning how to communicate through pencils and non-mouse click-oriented communication modes, because that cognitive skill set between what you're thinking about and getting it to express itself through a pencil is equally important. But beyond that, actually, it's the notion, and I hope every young emerging professional will hear this, is that any designer, any landscape architect worth their salt these days designs to LEED Silver at a minimum. That checklist is very easily rendered. Everybody should be hitting that mark without any need for notation. What we're not doing, I think, and what I'm pushing more aggressively with academic environments, academic institutions, is having students take sociology classes, having students take anthropology classes, because landscape is this incredible discipline that encompasses the full spectrum of our society. And if you do not understand human behavior, you will never be a successful landscape architect. Our work, whether it's at Land Collective or within the discipline of landscape architecture, should serve the purpose of ameliorating every social ill that's possible. And if we don't understand how to communicate with people through this great connective tissue that is landscape, we will fail as a discipline. We are on the ascent, whereas other disciplines are on the decline. And as we ascend to be leaders within not only this profession, but within this sphere, we need to have every asset available to us. And sociology and anthropology are really important to that success.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Chelsea for the next question.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi. So if you had to stake a Rus typhina, I think I'm saying that right,
yes.
How would you go about it?
I think I know where this came from.
Yes, that's a planted question, pardon the pun. Rus typhina dissecta is one of our signature plants from Land Collective. We have a few signature plants that we try to apply to every project, and Rus typhina can be very leggy, and if it's in a wind-blown area, it can fall over quickly before the roots get established. So there are multiple ways that you can stake it. Obviously, the traditional method, or if it's a container grown, you can do dead men, which straps to concrete and holds the plant in place. But yeah, that's a that's a challenged question.
Inside joke question. Hey, I don't think we've ever had one of those before. That's pretty exciting. All right, I'm going to ask another question from a viewer, Christopher. What is it that made you choose landscape architecture, and what keeps you motivated and moving forward in the field?
That's a wonderful question, and I appreciate it immensely. I didn't happen upon, I mean, I should say landscape architecture happened upon me. I didn't happen upon it. I was in high school, in that sort of co-ed environment of high school, a really challenged student in terms of learning. I ended up becoming an exchange student with this all-boys Anglican boarding school in about 100 miles northeast of Toronto. I met an art teacher there, the fellow that I described earlier. He gave me a capacity to communicate through visual information. I understood that there was something called art history, which was a visual representation of culture, something that I didn't understand before. I learned how to oil paint, how to throw pottery in conventional terms, how to print make, how to communicate. And all of a sudden, when I ended up in college, I went to a liberal arts college called Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut, and I chose the major of fine arts and the history of art with a minor in botany. So I had 2 majors and a minor. And the requirements for that institution were that you had to take other courses, government, chemistry, language, etc., as any true liberal arts school would do. But they had this requirement that you would write your papers within those other classes from the point of view of your discipline. So I was taking government classes and writing my papers as if they were art history papers. So I have this memory of writing something called Platonic Philosophy and the Art of the Koroi, the male figure in ancient Greek art, as a representation of democracy. And I took Plato's Republic, and I cited all these things, and I mapped how the male figure was identified as the ideal representation of democracy, and I got an A. And I never got A's. And I continued to get A's in all these different classes, so all of a sudden this capacity to learn visually became this tool where I went from failing out of high school to cum laude in college. And yeah, it's really cool. And I won the art prize for my graduation for the whole college, and I was well on my way. And my mother turned to me and said, "Yeah, art is all well and good. I'd like you to be a lawyer. Lawyers have all the power. Yeah, lawyers have all the power in the world. I want you to be in a position of power. You know." So I took the LSATs. I took the GREs. I got into law school in as much as I'm a troubled reader, but I got into law school at Villanova. But I also took my portfolio and applied to the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And as a result of that, I went back to my mom and I said, you know, hey, I got into law school to Villanova, but by the way, I also got into Harvard's Graduate School of Design. Where would you like me to go? And going to be immediately the apocryphal response is, I want the H on my car, and so I got to go to the GSP. And so that was my way of figuring out how to stay in a visual design world, take my minor in botany, my love of design, and figure out how to continue my education. So in as much as it found me, then I learned what I love about landscape architecture, which is this, that I came out of, I was the youngest associate, youngest principal, youngest owner of a firm called Olin, and at the time that I left, one of their, really modifying the range of projects that firm was undertaking, and ended up winning the Rome Prize, as I stated. And I think the thing that was most interesting to me, that in this very corporate environment of my old firm, we had to take all these tests. the Myers-Briggs, the DISC survey, all these things that identified us as partners and tried to align us into a direction together. The one thing that separated me from all of my partners actually was that I charted really high on empathy. I thought beyond myself more than anything else. It was very important to me to position myself in the context of others by understanding what their issues were and responding to it accordingly. So this thing that made me differentiated me from my partners ended up becoming my greatest asset as I formed my own firm. And the thing that motivates me and continues to motivate me is the impact that this discipline has and that I have within this discipline for changing the lives of other people. Just the way that art can change my life, I can change other people's lives by creating landscapes that are equitable, that offer everybody opportunity, whether they're privileged or underserved. You have a capacity within landscape to express yourself, to be expressed, and to elevate your human condition. That is so motivational to me. I love that capacity. This is why this discipline will save the world. We have such strength in our capacity to change the lives of other human beings. I'm sorry, I get really excited about that kind of thing.
I love that. We should all be so passionate, and I think landscape architecture as a whole could be a little more boisterous about.
Well, you should see me set up. I'm like a zealot when I get up on any podium. And I profession. I am John the Baptist. Even though I'm a secular humanist, I get out there and I want to change the world that way.
That's awesome. All right, Chelsea, let's go to you.
So, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice that I've ever been given. Actually, I have a mentor in Peter Rowland. Peter Rowland is an elder statesman of landscape architecture. He used to have his own firm. It then became Rowland Towers, and I think he has since retired. But he was instrumental. He was my last professor at Harvard, and there are other great stories about him, but one of the things that he offered me was the advice of staying focused on my work. Never, don't get too distracted by all the things that are happening around you, all the great things that might be happening around you, the invitations to participate on different committees or other events, but to remain true to your work and make sure that you monitor things and stay in touch with your colleagues and remember that they're working with you, and that part of your role as a principal is to help guide and teach and elevate, and all of those things are important. That was really sage advice for me as we're going into our 4th year. We have projects all over the country and sometimes out of our country. And people are beginning to recognize the work that Land Collective is doing, and so it can be very distracting when people say, "Hey, I want a little bit of this. Can I have your attention?" And sometimes I have to remember that people at home need me too, and that was a big lesson for this year. So yeah, that was very good advice for me.
Excellent. So we're talking about the practice, and going into 4 years now. Is there anything that surprises you in that daily practice?
I think the thing that I'm thrilled with is the response that we've gotten to an empathetic approach to the design process. Diminishing hubris and thinking beyond ourselves to problem solve through design is an extraordinarily valuable asset for others. I guess I was surprised by how well received we have been, and as I said, it was not only the jumping off the cliff and starting your own practice is incredibly frightening. It's not for everybody. I have a great support system in my partner and in my family and in my friends, in that they have been an emotional buoy for me. But the thing that I think is most surprising is that we have been, not only have we been well received, we've gotten great projects as a result, and I'm in every market that I used to be when I left my major corporate environment, and now we're a small studio again, and we're still everywhere that we used to be. And people are even more enthusiastically embracing us because I have no filters. I make the decisions, and my colleagues help me make those decisions, and we really are thoughtful about the projects that we undertake. Can we bring value to it? Can we help them? Can they help us grow as individuals, which also becomes an important aspect of it. So this has been an extraordinary adventure. I'm so pleased that the parachute not only opened, but it is, we're doing really well, and I love that, and that's thanks to all my colleagues.
Excellent. Speaking of your colleagues, let's throw it to Amy.
All right, so we have a question here from Christopher Williams. He's wondering, what are some of the biggest challenges or setbacks in international projects?
So we have taken limited steps towards international projects. In my old practice, we were really, I think the best word was we were very naive and had some failures because we didn't understand how foreign cultures deal with contractual obligations. So we have been very cautious about that. I'm really interested in people who are interested in what we like to deal with, and that isn't how some cultures want to deal with landscape architecture presently. Some people, some cultures still believe that it's a sauce that you pour over buildings and to decorate, and whereas I know it to be this discipline that can elevate culture and really inform the common good. So finding opportunities abroad, while they might be very sexy, are financially challenging and potentially not fulfilling in terms of how we as individuals will individuals within Land Collective will experience it. So I'm always hesitant to go abroad. If I'm going to go work on a project that's abroad, I want to be under the umbrella of somebody who has significant experience in whatever country that is. We're working down in the Caribbean presently with people that I know and trust. We have done some work in Europe, but we're taking it slow and steady. I want to make sure that we protect the studio in the context of the work that we do as well.
Excellent. If you need anybody to go check out that Caribbean project, I would volunteer for that.
Okay. Right. It to be one of the colder months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Warm here, it's even warmer there. So.
Perfect. Chelsea, you've got something?
So is there anything that you didn't learn while you were in landscape architecture school and you wish you had?
Well, now that I know how to learn, I'm eager to continue to learn. That's the thing that is, it took me until I was a young adult, 18, 19, 20, to actually learn how to learn. And that sounds really silly, but everybody learns things differently. And I think that is the greatest issue with education today, is that teachers and administrators of teachers have to remember that it's never just the textbook. Like, it doesn't work that way for everybody. And so now that I've learned how to learn, there are so many things that I wish that I could do. Like, I'd love to go back and take more anthropology classes. I'd love to take more classes in art history that are beyond the Far East studies that I did, but more African country or African culture art. Art is a reflection of every culture, so you learn more about people through their visual information, their own visual information, their cultural information, and the more you, since that's my vehicle for learning, visuals, the more I'm exposed to art, the more I know about different cultures. So I wish I could continue that more regularly. Yeah, so those are the areas that I should say one thing, actually. I'm a real science nerd. I'm not, as I said, I'm not the biggest reader, but I love reading about physics. And I even cite in my lectures why Stephen Hawking is actually a wannabe landscape architect, not necessarily a guy who looks at cosmology. But I would love to take physics classes. I'm terrible at math, but I love the ideas expressed in physics. And we actually, as I said, for those that ever, if you ever have a chance to go to a lecture where I'm talking, I will invariably invoke Stephen Hawking for all the things that he does. I love this guy. I think it's a really great means of talking about theory of relativity and quantum physics and why that's actually the description of landscape architecture.
That sounds very intriguing. Incredibly intriguing, actually.
Really cool.
Yeah, I'll be at a lecture somewhere.
Okay.
I gotta hear this.
I think actually, if you go on to our Vimeo account, on Land Collective's Vimeo account, and you go to the Portland Museum of Art Architalk series, I think I reference it in that. So the Portland Museum of Art has this Architalk series, and I think I actually did use that analogy, and so check it out.
All right, will do. We have a question from Laura. What is your favorite Land Collective project?
I have many, actually. It's not, there is no one. Oftentimes my favorite project is the one that I'm working on presently, or the one that I'm thinking most passionately about. I love the conceptualization of projects. I have a really talented crew of colleagues who do what I do, but also do what I don't do. So I love to think about the big picture and get everybody excited and have them inform this one big idea that we might have. But I think there are a couple of projects that are coming up. One involves a trestle bridge, a railroad bridge that's going to be converted into a linear park. The other, there's work that we're doing up in a small, tertiary city called Allentown, Pennsylvania. That it's sort of a plan for how that city might grow. At the same time, there's this park that we're doing, a new central park in Westfield, Indiana, that I'm very excited about. We're finishing up our construction documents for it, and yeah, there are so many. The end result of the one like Eskenazi Health Hospital in Indianapolis, where the goal was to create an environment where people would come whether they were seeking hospital services or not. That's a favorite of mine because it works. You bring in the way in which that site is designed and programmed. People are coming from all around, and it's on a hospital campus, and they're not even seeking hospital services, but they're there. So all of my favorite projects are the ones where people are present. That's the goal. Get people out there. A successful space is one that's well attended. If there's nobody there and it's extraordinarily beautiful, it's a failure. If it's filled with people all the time, that is successful for us, and those are my favorites.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. What advice or guidance would you offer a student who is just starting their study of landscape architecture?
Again, I think the challenge with the profession is that there's a lot to take in, a lot to master quickly. There are fundamentals of grading and drawing and systems. Those are all important. They're extraordinarily valuable. But these days you have to go beyond the normative learning process. You have to take in sociology. You have to take in anthropology to understand the human condition. The whole point of this issue for me is that even if it's the most sustainable site that you're working on, even if it's the most verdant, beautiful site, if human beings are not interested in it, no matter how high it is in sustainability, it will be ignored. And once it's ignored, it will fail. So the means of success is, for me, is always that aspect of human engagement, where what you want to be able to do is avoid landscapes that are all about the form-based landscape architecture. There are form-based building architects, and then there are humanist architects. And my biggest fear for the profession is that we're moving into an arena of form-based landscape architecture where the object itself becomes the attractant, and that's fine, but it's also can tend to be faddish and therefore ephemeral. if you remember to design for human beings, and human beings engage in that design will retain its relevance and live beyond you. I always say I'm designing for my grandnieces and grandnephews, not for myself. I want the work to live well beyond me, as landscape architecture can do. It's this balance between entropy and static systems. That's what makes it so exciting. But the notion is, as you're studying, as you're thinking about your experiences, remember with every mouse click, with every pencil touch to trace, that human beings are the end users of this. And when you solve your problems based on human experience, every other system fits into it really easily. Because again, as I said, every landscape architect worth their salt now designs to lead silver. And a successful place is one that's well attended. So if you can design for how people will communicate in space that you design, everything else will fall into place and it will live well beyond you. That's what you need to learn how to do.
Speaking of communicating in space, Phoebe has a very interesting question.
Sure. So we got a viewer question here from Fayez Rawas, and the question is, it's a big one. Here we go.
Okay.
If you were chosen as the dedicated landscape architect on board of the first mission to Mars, would you go, and which plant, assuming it would live, would you take with you?
Okay.
There's a second part too, but we'll ask that later.
Okay. So again, I'm a science nerd, so yes, absolutely I would go. You don't have to show me The Martian with what's his name? Yeah, Matt Damon. I keep that on my phone, actually. That's a movie that I travel with on the plane all the time. Mostly because he's a botanist and he's talking about plants, and his saving grace was the potato. Honestly, I can think of one plant that I would like to take. It's one of our signature plants. It's called Hemerocallis citrina. It's the citron lily. It's edible, for one, so the flower buds are edible. But it's one of these extraordinary daylilies that blooms at night. And not only does it bloom at night, as opposed to during the day, but it's fragrant. So it has olfactory qualities. It's this beautiful chartreusey yellow. It's an aesthetically pleasing plant, has grassy foliage, stands very tall. It blooms when you wouldn't expect it to bloom, and it's really productive. I just love that plant. So that's probably the plant that I would take with me. That's a wonderfully sweet question. Yeah.
Not a
And it also grows
ruse.
in droves at his beach house. So.
That's right. So I would take a Rus typhina dissecta, but I can get more value out of the citron lily probably, because I could eat it. That's the thing. If I had to.
Very practical. I'm going to pass it on to Chelsea.
So this is one of our classic questions. If you were given a golden ticket to visit any landscape tomorrow, what would it be?
I would love to go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It's a town, an ancient town that they've only unearthed a small portion of. I shared with you that I'm a secular humanist. I believe in human beings over anything else. I think if I were a religious person, I would be more akin to Buddhist and Quaker than other aspects, because I believe there's that of humanity in every human being. So I want to make sure that I'm engaging other human beings for the elevation of culture. But to me, it's this sort of wonderfully romantic, ancient thing that nature has subsumed and is slowly being revealed again. So it's kind of this palimpsest of culture, of a different culture. So it embodies all the things that I have been excited about my whole life, about the description of other people through artifact and through art. The notion that landscape itself is a palimpsest. You do something, it erodes away. You do it again, it erodes away. It's this marriage of living and static systems. Even the ficus trees have subsumed these temples, and in that there's beauty. It is different than me in that it's from a different culture. So we as human beings learn more about ourselves by visiting others and learning how they understand themselves than from simply looking at our same group, right? That's that sort of inbred notion of what we should be like is why I think we're in the situation we are with our political system right now. So I love the idea of going to Angkor Wat, and I hope that once Land Collective has had its capacity, reaches a really, really, really stable place, which it may never, that I will be given the opportunity to trust my colleagues and go away for 2 weeks and come back. I trust them implicitly, but I'm still frightened of going away for 2 weeks.
All right. Following up on what your dream project to visit is, what would be your dream project to build? What's the one project you would love?
Oh gosh. I think that there are. I think that I'm excited about a project that might be coming up for us. The one that I referenced, that I can't talk too much about, but it's the redesign of a piece of infrastructure, a bridge, a railroad bridge into a linear park. I find bridges fascinating symbolically. Bridges are these constructs that cross an abyss, right? So they cross a challenge, and they get you to the other side, and that's this sort of aspect of enlightenment. You change, through matriculation over this thing, you change and express yourself differently. But the neat thing about bridges for how we approach them, and we've done a couple in the studio, none of this scale, but we've done a couple, and we've taken this piece of infrastructure and made it place, so that you can get to the apex of the bridge, or the center point of the bridge, and not only see where you're going, but you can see where you've been. And there's something wonderfully holistic about that notion of infrastructure that gets you across a chasm of some kind, that allows you an aspect of enlightenment so that you know yourself in the context of where you are relative to where you've been and where you're going. And that, to me, is beautiful. It's poetic. It embodies so many of the aspects of landscape architecture that I think are compelling, because it's about human beings, it's about infrastructure defined in a new way that is not set aside, but actually encapsulated in the living condition, the living human condition, and that it has this wonderful narrative of understanding where you are, where you've been, and where you're going.
Excellent. I love how all of your answers come back to the people in the space. So, but you can tell that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Chelsea.
I wanted to go back to Fayez. I think the gentleman's name was Fayez.
Yeah.
There was a second part to his question which involved some aspect of books.
It did, and actually it's good timing because you have another question here about books.
Okay.
So the second part of that question was just recommend a book, design or otherwise. And we have a question here from Avery, which says, what non-design oriented book has influenced your approach to design the most? So if you could talk about books for us.
Okay, books. So there are 3 books that I recommend the most, actually, out of all that I have recently read. And again, I'm not a well-read human being. I get my information mostly visually or acoustically, but I do try to read on a regular basis. It's just hard for me to find the book that actually, where the synapses really work and I can absorb the information steadily. There are 3 that I love. One was given to me, recommended to me when I was at the Academy after I had jumped off the cliff and separated from my former firm and was starting my own practice. As I was parachuting off the cliff, he said, you are going to be a leader of other human beings. I want you to read this book. And it turned out to be Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. There are several translations. He was the last great Roman leader. He wrote this book on the edge of his civilization up in Austria, where he was defending his realm, defending what he understood to be civilization. And it was a diary for all intents and purposes. It wasn't necessarily meant to be read by others, but it was his own thoughts, so several of them repeat themselves. I've read the 1893 edition, the 1970s edition by Penguin, and most recently, and this is the one that I highly recommend, there's a book that was translated by the Hicks brothers a couple of years back, and I actually give that away to clients, other leaders, because this is why. You read his book at 4 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep because I'm freaking out about something that's happening in the studio. I pick up this book which sits beside my bed and I read it, and it's in a contemporary language. And the things that Marcus Aurelius is thinking are all the things that I'm thinking about in the 21st century. So this man, 2,500 years ago, is thinking the same things that I am, which reminds me that human beings have not changed one iota. Technology has changed, but human beings have not changed. And that reminds me that this man and everyone living between us in time, and those that will follow me, will be thinking the same things. So if you can understand that as a common basis, you're already 10 steps ahead in how to think about how other human beings will behave. The other book that I highly recommend, it is a design book, but it wasn't meant for landscape architects, it was meant for building architects, and that is Pelasma's The Eyes of the Skin, where he is really giving thoughtful reason why we should not be designing as form-based architects, and why I read it. It's very short. You can read it in a half an hour, the essay, and it continues to remind me not to objectify landscape, but to make it spatially relevant to human beings. That's the one thing that does. And then finally, my big book, which I talk about I referenced before, is A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. I love that book. If you just sort of sit back, be zen about it, read it, understand it. It's very easy to read. I was always impressed by his common language. It will change your perception of the world and your position in it. So those are the 3 books that I recommend.
All right. Chelsea, got something? Oh, I think we might have lost Chelsea.
Okay.
Looks like she froze. I'll get that. What is the most memorable project you have worked on, good or bad?
It's too dangerous to talk about the bad ones. There are always some. The interesting thing when I started Land Collective, and this is for all you younger practitioners who will eventually run your own studios, there will be projects that you never ever want to put on your website. They are the ones that you take on in desperation to pay the bills. And I'm thankful to the point that I think right now, after 3 years, Land Collective really doesn't have any more projects that will not make the website that pay the bills. That being said, I think that I'm trying to think of some that are the ones that are really good are, again, the ones that people are attracted to for social purpose. I think I already cited Eskenazi Hospital. It's a LEED Gold construct. It was in a hospital environment, but it's actually an attractant, a place that people come whether they're seeking services or not. I'm really becoming interested in post-industrial sites, so we've got a couple of projects under our belt where we're dealing with challenged soils and still trying to render those places for social purpose. One of them is about to be completed, called Pennovation, the University of Pennsylvania's new innovation campus. That will open up in the next month or 2. But another one is in Muncie, Indiana, the Kitzelman Trailhead, which is, if you know anything about Muncie, it has some really challenged soil conditions. It's a post-industrial city. It was named Middle America by one of the first psychological studies of Americans done in the 1920s. It was called Middle America because that's literally where the middle of America was in terms of population density. And when industry left that city, they left it with a great deal of challenges, lots of Superfund sites, and we're working on the crossing of the White River by use of a historic bridge that will be moved to the site, and this repositioning of levees and along the White River to create socially engageable space and the union of 2 disparate trailheads across the river. And the thing that's beautiful about it is that Muncie tends to be demographically separated north from south in terms of economic equity. And this thing is unifying two sides. In the same way that I spoke about the poetics of bridges, this is doing just that. It's bringing people from two different communities, giving them an opportunity to go across and embrace each other, which I think is beautiful. So,
Actually, I do about Muncie. I graduated high school in Muncie, Indiana.
oh, very good.
Yeah, I was there for years. Following up to that question, what's the most memorable response you've ever had of one of your projects, whether it be client themselves or from those who use the space for the response later?
I would actually have to say that perhaps some of the most powerful commentary has come from that hospital project Eskenazi that I spoke about. That is a catch-all hospital, so it's the hospital of final means, right? It's the one that serves everybody. And I have had people. I'm notorious in my projects. I never abandon a client. Once a contract is done, once a project is done, I'm still visiting, still manipulating, and to this day, even though that project is probably 2.5, 3 years live, I'm still visiting that site. I'm actually bringing plants from my own garden, putting it in there. I'm physically manipulating stuff every time I'm in Indianapolis. I stop there. I physically manipulate stuff. I check with them. I talk about what's working, what's not working, etc. So I'm out there. Literally, I have a trowel that I keep buried in the garden. The garden's there and in the plaza, and I dig it up. I manipulate. And the beautiful thing is that the patients there, again, this is the catch-all hospital, so these are the people with the significant economic challenges, see me working there. We engage in a conversation. If they learn that, you know, the design is part of our studio, and they're incredibly thankful. They just open up. They smile. They say, "I love coming here," or "I brought my child here," or some other thing. And it's this notion, from my perspective, that we designed the place, this new campus, where healing starts not when you enter the building, but actually when you cross the boundary at the vehicular edge or the path edge. The notion that people under stress, whether they're the people who are physically ill or the people supporting the people that are physically ill, stress is a real issue. And when you can positively inform people's lives in a way that they know or don't even know, that to me is success. And I literally love when I'm there and somebody walks up to me and says, you know, this is a great place. That's joyful to me.
Excellent. Amy, got something?
Sure, absolutely. So we just had another viewer question come in. Suzanne asks, is there an area of specialization you could recommend to a student who's about halfway through landscape architecture master's program at UTA?
Specialization. Again, I think one of the things that I would like to see happen with landscape architecture students, if they are, because they are going to inherit not only the discipline, but they're going to inherit the world. So one of the things that my colleague Amy and my colleague Laura and my colleague John just did up in Allentown was do public outreach to really gauge the opinion of the full spectrum of that society, to understand how they want their parks, in this case a specific park, but other public arenas, to how they want to see them built, you know, their content, their program capacity. And one of the things that I think will be extraordinarily valuable to any young practitioner is to understand how to deal with public outreach for engagement and alignment of people's thinking, but also for the information that it provides in terms of metrics. The beauty of the exercise that we did, I think it was even last Friday, was that we came away with this effort not only with beautiful imagery of how people were earnestly interested in what was going to inform their lives in the future of Allentown, but we came back and we could, if there's such a word, we could metricize it, right? We could take their information and glean from it and actually help the client know where they needed to push more. In this case, what became the fundamental truth out of that experience was the citizenry really wanted an urban grocer condition, a market condition where they could live in this downtown environment and find good food, which you forget as good citizens of this world how many food deserts there are out there and how difficult it is to get good food. And this is a highly urban condition, and the people, we gave them a voice, and hopefully it'll eventually get up on our website if it hasn't already, but we literally gave them a physical way of communicating back. And the end results was a list of things that would help us design for them, which was incredibly important. So if you're a young person out there in the world seeking education, your best tool will be that of a capacity to communicate with others and get them to talk. It's not about you, it's about them. Get them to talk to you and listen to what they have to say.
That is great advice. Chelsea, you're back with us. You have something? Uh-oh. All right, no problem. I will ask this next one. We were just talking about young people, students. So, as you're moving on in your career, what do you hope that the next generation of landscape architects does after you and your peers are retired?
What do I think the next group of landscape architects what will they strive for?
Yeah, what do you hope they can accomplish that the generation did?
So I would love to see to take the reins from where we are, where we're aspiring at Land Collective, and recognize that this profession has an extraordinary amount of power and a capacity to engage citizenry. If you've heard nothing about what I've been talking about, hopefully you've heard that I believe not only in the power of landscape architecture as a discipline, but its capacity to engage people in conversation, and that the best environments of our design, Land Collective's design, are those that foster communication between people who would not normally speak to each other. We always say, as a result of the design of a Land Collective effort, say a chemistry professor and a young protester who would not normally speak with each other find themselves in an environment where they feel comfortable enough to sit next to each other, and as a result of that adjacency, engage in a conversation, and that conversation comes up with an idea, and that idea 10 years down the road saves the world. We're not smart enough to come up with the idea that saves the world, but we are smart enough to come up with the idea that gets those people to talk with each other. And as young citizens of this world, if you're seeing nothing happening on the television, you're seeing that there is a lot of disparity between the capacity of human beings to speak with each other. Our presidential election process is manifest with this notion. And the beauty, I think, of our profession is that we can solve these ills if we put our minds to it. And the notion that you can describe a place through something that you've built that can be extraordinarily beautiful, verdant, sustainable, economically a driver, but that the notion that human beings can communicate as a result of that is a very powerful thing. And that would be my aspiration for young landscape architects, to remember that, to take that to heart, to actually run with it as fast as you can, because otherwise I'm frightened.
All right. Miraculously, we are at 1 minute until the top of the hour. So thank you so very much for being with us. Are there any final words you want to speak out?
I can't think of anything in particular except to express the joy that I've had communicating with you and all those that are out there. I only see your faces, but I know that there are others out there who are participating, and I greatly appreciate the participation and the inquiry. And I also welcome people to engage with Land Collective either through social media or by coming and visiting the studio. I'm excited to say that as a result of our current successes, we've purchased a new studio. It's going to be renovated. We hope to be into it by the end of the year. So we're excited about the new digs that we will have to continue our mission. of empathy-driven design and the capacity to help people communicate with each other.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Amy,
everybody.
for helping out. And
Here.
thank you to all of our viewers for joining us. Be sure to check out Land Collective's website. Look up some of those videos that David discussed, especially the students talking one. Sounds amazing. And be sure to join us next month in September when we will have Gina Ford from Sasaki.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, that'll be the second Thursday of September, 3 o'clock.
Oh, she's a joy.
There's a ringing endorsement. Make sure you join us. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next month.